In its 30+ year history, not many studios have had the opportunity to earn the Zelda license. Capcom, Koei Tecmo, Philips. And that's why it's a big deal that not only has another joined the club, but this new one is an indie studio with only one game under their belt, Crypt of the Necrodancer. This one game made enough of an impression on Nintendo to lend them one of their biggest IPs, at a point where it's bigger than ever. Cadence of Hyrule is the first new Zelda since Breath of the Wild, and so with all that, there's certainly a lot resting on this game. And luckily for Brace Yourself games, Cadence of Hyrule is absolutely fantastic. Unlike Crypt of the Necrodancer, which is entirely procedurally generated and has the potential to provide hundreds of hours of content, Cadence is a lot smaller and more focused. There's still random elements, but the core game clocked in at just over 5 hours for me. There's certainly reason to keep coming back, but this is a game about quality over quantity. You're not continuously diving into dungeons like in Crypt. Instead, Cadence takes inspiration from the first Zelda, and throws you into an overworld with no guidance other than to find 4 dungeons. Cadence of Hyrule takes place right after Crypt of the Necrodancer, where Cadence magically finds herself in the world of Hyrule. Only there's a problem. An evil force named Octavo has sent the King, Zelda, and Link to sleep, and so it's up to Cadence to awaken the heroes and save Hyrule. Together. At the start of the game, you get a choice between playing as Link or Zelda. It doesn't really matter who you choose, as you can play as the other over the course of the story anyway. Zelda can use magical elements such as Din's fire and Nehru's love, and Link has his shield and a spin attack. The multiple character dynamic doesn't really get used until the end of the game in a few light puzzles, so just go for whatever character you like best. Though if you have a buddy around, the two of you can play together via co-op. Just make sure you both have a sense of rhythm. And you might wonder, hey, why is everyone jumping around? Well, the core gimmick of Crypt of the Necrodancer was it's not just a roguelike and not just a dungeon crawler, but it's also a rhythm game. Every beat is an opportunity to move, and combat is as simple as walking into an enemy. Not much has changed in Cadence, but with the extra budget, the jump in presentation is extraordinary. This is one of the most beautiful pixel art games in some time, and you can even see your weapon, whereas in Crypt, it was just a swipe effect. Though if you really can't hold a beat, there is an option that basically disables rhythm. Though your speed in this mode increases the enemy's speed, so don't bop around too recklessly. So not only does Cadence build upon Crypt of the Necrodancer as a sequel, but it infuses itself with a ton of Zelda elements too. Crypt didn't need an overworld because that wasn't the core of the game, but in the context of Zelda, it absolutely works. Outside of extra heart pieces, bottles, and other optional items, you're not really going to find all that many puzzles. The puzzle is really navigation, and when you finally do track down a dungeon, you'll find a far more familiar setting for Crypt of the Necrodancer, and by that I mean randomly generated dungeons. It does start off a bit hard, but once you're in the groove, so to speak, you'll be taking down enemies left, right, and center. It also helps that, unlike Crypt, a lot of your power-ups are permanent. If you find a heart container, that's yours forever. Likewise with a lot of weapons, and then there's Zelda power-ups like the bow, hookshot, and power glove. You won't lose those either. The only thing you really lose is dungeon progress, keys and rupees, and minor status upgrades. And those diamonds you find can be used to buy even more upgrades in the Game Over store, just like in Crypt of the Necrodancer. It feels like they made Cadence for those who aren't necessarily fans of roguelikes. There's still elements of the genre in there, but the compromises to make it a Zelda game results in something I think a lot more people will get a feel for. And you know, I'd say the game's worth buying just for the soundtrack alone. I mean, a Zelda rhythm game? That's a match made in heaven. You'll hear tracks from all over the place, from Telltale Heights to Gerudo Valley, to even calming towns with Kakariko Village. Take a listen. It's a celebration of the soundtrack and a celebration of the series, revisiting some of the most famous enemy designs in the franchise, both old and new, with Stone Talos from Breath of the Wild, or reimagining bosses like Gleeok from Zelda 1. Every Zelda fan should try Cadence, but you come for Zelda and you stay for everything else. It really is one of the most successful crossovers in gaming. I mean, yeah, Chew is basically a slime and Akis is basically a bat, but that's not why it works. Cadence finds the souls of both franchises and makes them sing, and when you're consistently kicking butt to the Great Sea, it's hard not to have a good time. Though I did have to keep reminding myself to use items. The core game holds up just fine using standard combat, and so I only really ended up putting out items during boss fights if they were giving me a hard time. It's one area where Cadence doesn't fully embrace Zelda. If you're looking to 100% the game, then you will use a bit more, but your inventory is always a bit of an afterthought. And I will say, the lasting impression wasn't quite as potent as Crypt of the Necrodancer. I think it's an overall higher quality game, but Crypt's moment-to-moment gameplay was extensive and addictive. That was a game you could play for months and months, and I don't think that's going to be the case with Cadence. I never expected we'd get a game like Cadence of Hyrule, but when you play it, it makes so much sense. I was bobbing my entire body to the rhythm when in the zone, with Telltale Heights on at full blast. It's amazing to see Nintendo so trusting with their IP, and that trust paid off. I like Cadence of Hyrule a lot. I think it's a brilliant next step for Crypt of the Necrodancer, and hopefully it'll put Brace Yourself games on the radar of Zelda fans. Fans of both Zelda and Crypt will find something they love here. It doesn't quite have the evergreen addiction of Crypt, but what Cadence does, it does extraordinarily well. And like I said earlier, it's worth it for the soundtrack alone. Thanks so much for watching, and of course be sure to subscribe to Game Explained for a lot more on Zelda, and other things gaming too. Until next time, bye.